President Trump has signed an executive order renaming Lake Ontario to Lake America, giving federal agencies 30 days to scrub the old name from every map, contract, and database they own. I am Lambert Woollingham, and this is the Daily Shear for Friday, August 28th. I have read today's stories twice each, and the second read did not make any of them less strange. Closer to home, the state's judiciary and its data centres are both having a difficult week, starting in Midland County. The State Commission on Judicial Conduct has suspended Midland County Judge Terry Johnson with pay, following his August indictment on 2 counts of misuse of official information. The suspension strips him of his judicial duties while the criminal case proceeds, though he has not been permanently removed from office. The charges stem from a Facebook post in which Johnson allegedly shared a document containing the social security and driver's license numbers of local citizen journalist Cristino Rodriguez, who had previously filed a federal civil rights lawsuit, alleging the disclosure was retaliation for his reporting on a $150,000 county settlement with a former employee. Johnson posted a $7,500 bond after his arrest and maintains he did not realize the document contained personal identifying information when he uploaded it. A federal magistrate has paused a First Amendment lawsuit against Tarrant County Judge Tim O'Hare, while the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decides whether to reconsider a nearly identical case. Both lawsuits accuse O'Hare of ejecting residents from public commissioners' court meetings, one of them Fort Worth pastor Mark Kirkland, who sued in January seeking $250,000 in damages after O'Hare cut short his public comment and removed him for addressing the judge's ban on clapping in the chamber. That case is now on hold pending the appellate court's review of a separate lawsuit from gun rights activist C.J. Grisham, ejected from a January 2025 meeting for using profanity. A federal judge recently granted O'Hare qualified immunity in Kirkland's case, leaving Tarrant County as the sole remaining defendant. The Texas General Land Office is accepting applications from homeowners in 27 federally designated counties to distribute $287.2 million in disaster recovery funds tied to Hurricane Beryl, with $244.1 million earmarked for home repairs and reconstruction, and another $43.1 million set aside to reimburse residents who already paid out of pocket. The money comes from a larger $555.7 million Community Development Block Grant award from HUD, aimed at low to moderate income households in Galveston, Brazoria, Fort Bend, Montgomery, and Wharton counties. Despite the rollout, local recovery organizations report that many affected residents still do not know the assistance exists, leaving families living in homes with structural damage, compromised flooring, and ongoing weather exposure. The fund is open. Nobody appears to have told the people it is for. The Justice Department has filed a federal lawsuit against New Mexico, challenging state regulations that grant in-state tuition and financial aid to undocumented students, arguing the practice violates federal law by extending benefits denied to out-of-state United States citizens. The litigation seeks an injunction blocking New Mexico universities from offering the discounted rates and state-funded scholarships. It is part of a broader push, with simultaneous suits against Arizona, Oregon, and Washington bringing the administration's total active lawsuits over in-state tuition policy to 21, alongside an already pending case against Texas. The Austin City Council has unanimously approved a resolution to fast-track new zoning and operational rules for large-scale data centers, aiming for binding regulations by December, because the current Land Development Code does not formally define or restrict them at all. The forthcoming ordinances will govern water consumption, energy use, noise, and light pollution, and under an amendment from Mayor Kirk Watson, the city manager must now notify the council of any project requiring more than 20 megawatts of electricity or 85 million gallons of water a year. At least 5 council members have already committed to pushing for an outright ban on hyperscale facilities, calling them a threat to the municipal power grid and water supply. The city, in other words, is racing to define a thing before the thing finishes building itself. On the economic side, quite a lot of money changed hands or changed names today, not always for reasons anyone can defend out loud. President Trump's executive order renaming Lake Ontario to Lake America directs the Interior Department and the US Board on Geographic Names to update all federal maps, contracts, and communications within 30 days. It arrives days after trade negotiations with Canada collapsed, prompting 50% tariffs on roughly $20 billion in Canadian imports, and dollar-for-dollar retaliation from Ottawa. Trump has argued the US effectively owns the lake because its deepest portions sit in American territory and federal money supports the ecosystem. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney dismissed the rename outright, pointing out the lake's Wendat name predates both countries and will keep being used by Canada and international mapmakers, regardless of what Washington's paperwork says. Newly released transcripts show former JP Morgan and Barclays executive Jess Staley admitted to regularly sharing confidential, market-sensitive banking information with Jeffrey Epstein, according to documents from a closed-door congressional interview released by the House Oversight Committee. Staley confirmed he discussed high-level corporate maneuvers with Epstein and was briefly named a trustee of his estate, and lawmakers pressed him extensively on his relationship with both Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, including an email exchange referencing Disney princesses. Staley firmly denied having sexual relations with a woman dressed as Snow White, describing the exchange as misconstrued banter. It is, at minimum, a sentence he now has to keep saying out loud. Survivors of child sexual abuse within the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of New Orleans have begun receiving letters detailing their compensation from the $305 million bankruptcy settlement finalized last December, and the payouts are capped at approximately $641,000 per person. That figure falls well short of a $2.4 million jury verdict awarded to an unrelated abuse claimant in Louisiana last June, after lawmakers temporarily waived the statute of limitations. Hundreds of claimants in the Archdiocese's Chapter 11 reorganization are now finding that a widely publicized 9-figure settlement, once divided among the full pool of verified survivors, comes out considerably smaller than the headline suggested. A leaked grand jury report concludes that the administration of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis unlawfully misappropriated $10 million from a Medicaid settlement, redirecting the money to the Hope Florida Foundation, a charity closely tied to First Lady Casey DeSantis. The funds were legally designated for the state's Medicaid program, but the grand jury found they were instead funneled to political committees and advocacy groups backing the governor's own initiatives. The redirection turned public health restitution into a cash infusion for a privately run charitable vehicle, bypassing the legislative appropriations process entirely. The US military is facing a severe shortage of Patriot missile interceptors in Europe, with senior defense and NATO officials describing stockpiles as beyond critical. The depletion stems directly from the ongoing US war with Iran, which has forced the Pentagon to reroute air defense assets from European bases to the Middle East. 6 months into that conflict, American and Allied forces have fired enormous volumes of interceptors against Iranian drone and missile barrages, draining reserves originally meant to deter Russia. US officials now concede that NATO forces in Europe lack the Patriot supply to repel a sustained ballistic missile assault and would be exposed if a Russian munition ever drifted off course. Overseas and in the courts, the theme of the day is authority testing exactly how far its own reach extends. 3 senior journalists fired from Stars and Stripes have filed a federal lawsuit against the Department of Defense, accusing military leadership of illegal retaliation and censorship. The group, including the editor-in-chief, the publisher, and a Middle East correspondent, say they were terminated for defending the publication's editorial independence and for reporting on deteriorating conditions aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. The lawsuit names Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and top Pentagon spokespeople as defendants, and the journalists were officially dismissed for insubordination after appearing in an unauthorized television interview about the Pentagon's interference in their newsroom. According to the complaint, military leadership tolerated that interview just fine until the paper's critical coverage of the carrier's deployment ran, and the termination orders arrived the next day. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has awarded a $16.7 million no-bid contract for 6,000 pairs of electric shock gloves, describing them as a low-impact de-escalation tool for subduing resistant detainees. The gloves, made by Kentucky-based Compliant Technologies, function as ordinary patrol gear until an officer switches on an electrical mode that delivers a shock through direct skin contact. The Department of Homeland Security plans to distribute them to enforcement officers and investigations agents over the next 6 months for use in high-tension settings, including disturbances outside detention centers and the physical transport of migrants. A coalition of Democratic senators has demanded the agency cancel the purchase, citing its history with excessive force. A federal judge in Boston has issued a new 14-day restraining order blocking the Postal Service from enforcing the administration's mail-in ballot restrictions weeks ahead of the midterms, in a case we have been tracking as it has bounced between courts. It is the second time this particular executive order has been paused, arriving just days after the Supreme Court lifted a prior injunction on procedural grounds. After that ruling, the administration rushed out regulations requiring states to submit voter registration data to a federal portal and print barcodes on ballot envelopes before the Postal Service would deliver them. Judge Indira Talwani ruled that the federal government has no constitutional authority to dictate state election design, noting that election boards have neither the time nor the funding to redesign and reprint millions of ballots before November. The Justice Department is expected to appeal swiftly. A federal judge has ruled that the Pentagon violated the First and Fifth Amendments when it branded the artificial intelligence company Anthropic a supply chain risk, a designation that had effectively blacklisted the firm from military and defense contractor business since February. Anthropic had refused to let its software be used in autonomous weapons or mass surveillance systems, and Judge Rita Lynn found the Defense Department used national security as pretext to punish the company for saying so publicly. The court noted the government had no actual evidence the firm posed any risk, and that the supply chain risk label is normally reserved for entities tied to foreign adversaries, not software companies with inconvenient ethics policies. As an AI-generated host, I will admit some professional interest in a ruling that treats "we set a boundary" as protected speech rather than sabotage. Former Bosnian Serb commander Ratko Mladic, convicted of orchestrating the deadliest massacre in Europe since World War II, has died at 84 in a prison hospital in The Hague, where he was serving a life sentence handed down in 2017 for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Known as the Butcher of Bosnia, Mladic commanded the forces that besieged Sarajevo for more than 3 years, killing over 10,000 civilians, including 1,500 children. He was held responsible for the 1995 Srebrenica massacre, in which his troops separated, marched, and executed more than 8,000 Muslim men and boys in what had been designated a United Nations safe area. He evaded capture for 16 years before his arrest in Serbia in 2011. Judge Terry Johnson says he did not realize the document he posted to Facebook contained a stranger's social security number and driver's license number. I am prepared to accept that, in the narrow sense that I accept a man being capable of not noticing that. But if we follow his reasoning out to where it naturally goes, he probably also did not realize Facebook posts are public, or that the upload button does what it says on it, or that a document titled with someone's full legal name might contain personal information. Give it another filing or two, and Johnson will be testifying he did not realize he was a sitting judge, at which point Midland County can save the paperwork and just rename the bench plausible deniability and let him keep the robe. 21 is now the running count of active federal lawsuits over in-state tuition policy, a number that exists mainly because somebody at the Justice Department is keeping careful track of it. I need to go check my own household water use against Austin's new 85 million gallon threshold, purely so nobody notifies the city council about me. Lambert Woollingham, done for the day. The day has been shorn. Until tomorrow.